Town guest.
Oh, there it is.
I would actually come over to a bathroom because I like it. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
All this setup is.
No.
Okay, just so you know, we're getting ready to live stream.
Everybody best behavior.
Right, it's all,
Like too much glare.
we're interviewing you, Bob.
Michaela, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. All right, Mr. Chairman, I think you actually have a quorum, just by the
Lovely.
chinny chin chin.
I don't have an agenda.
Well, the first item was going to be kind of a debrief kicking around our experiences with the affordable housing program.
Oh,
but
great.
we do have an invited guest, Karen Martin, here, and the second item pertains to an update to our credit enhancement policy that we're going through.
Oh.
We started with our finance committee, and we're to the point that we would love to get some input from this group, if possible. So
Why don't we start with that then?
I was gonna say, I'm happy to do either
Yeah,
one.
that'd be great.
It's great company. I'm happy to be here for the whole meeting if you like. Yes, as Tom said, the finance committee has asked for an update to our credit enhancement agreement policy. And that policy was written back in 2020, and it was really, it was absolutely focused, not really, it was absolutely focused on economic development, credit enhancement agreements. And really what we've been, are accepting lately, there's been affordable housing credit enhancement agreement requests. And so there is a request to say, hey, we should really have our policy reflect the goals of reflect our housing goals and put that back in and included in how a credit enhancement agreement is developed. And so that's really what we're here to do. There's a process that the finance committee is looking at and trying to tighten up and streamline. But the real goal for me tonight, if you will, is to get through a set of objectives, really. What do we want to ask people who are coming to us with a credit enhancement agreement? And so I just want to, say, I laid out some of those in the materials that I sent out, but I'm not a housing, I'm not a housing planner per se. So I suspect there's lots of room to.
Right.
I'm sorry, Tom?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so the policy as it's currently constructed is really cumbersome. Again, as Karen prefaced, it was really set up contemplating economic development credit enhancement agreements, which are totally different than affordable housing. And because of that, SEDCO as an organization plays an integral role in those economic development ones in terms of working with applications, vetting them, and that policy develops a set of criteria that applications are compared against. So council, when it gets to them, can make an informed decision. Is this meeting our policy goals or whatever they set out? So this effort is really to carve out the uniqueness of affordable housing, create a separate set of criteria that are more relevant and appropriate for this kind of project rather than economic development. And that's what we need your input on. Are we asking those right questions
Exactly.
in terms of being able to evaluate, I guess, the value, if you will, of a proposal?
And the way the economic development credit enhancement agreement is structured is there is a list of objectives. And in order to start the process, really, an applicant has to say, I'm meeting at least 3 of these objectives and here's how I'm doing it. So we wanted to say, all right, what are the housing objectives? And that's what I have in this first summary, if you will. And I don't know if it was
Yeah,
in
we're just
the.
pulling it up right now, I think.
Oh, good.
As we're pulling that up, the other thing this group and certainly the council and staff has come to appreciate is really how critical CEAs are for any affordable housing project that is vying for the QAP program. It is nearly essential for them to get, it's not just about improving the bottom line and the money, financial aspects. It's really getting as much as 3 additional points that a single point can make the difference, much less 3. So getting this right and is really important. I mean, I believe all of our modern affordable housing projects have CEAs of one sort or another.
Absolutely. And it's not only the objectives, it's also, I want to go through with you the materials that we're asking them to submit to demonstrate some of the objectives and needs of the council to review the applications. And then we'll also talk a little bit about where the Housing Alliance fits in the review of our proposed CEA. And I did heavily rely upon your submission requirements that you set forward for doing your allocations of your fund that you have. So you'll see some of those, hopefully they'll sound familiar. But let's start with, really, what do we want from a project requesting a CEA? They obviously have to meet the state requirements. And there's, two basic requirements. But we're asking them, what in addition do we want to meet for the town of Scarborough? Why is this project good for us? And so I've come up with 9. And then I said, hey, you're going to need to meet 4 of these because there's a few more objectives here than in the economic development piece. So let's just start, from the top. The project will increase the supply of affordable housing, sort of a given. And I'm using the attached definition that's in the zoning ordinance. I didn't attach it to the memo, but that's what we're talking about. And so second, that's a softball. That's an easy A, if you will.
If the application doesn't meet number 1, I don't
Yeah.
think we
Exactly.
consider it further.
Exactly. The project will demonstrate consistency with the town's comprehensive plan. That also is a given. That's a minimum. We have to do that from a policy perspective. The project will leverage additional funding. I said that is equal to or greater than the CEA request. So let's stop there for a second to see if that resonates with you, if that makes sense.
That doesn't make sense to me.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Meaning if you're asking for $1 million in funding from the town of Scarborough, show us that $1 million is leveraging it at a minimum an additional $1 million.
So if I project that over the 15 years, I'll save $1 million in taxes, or if the taxes I'll save over 15 years will get me $1 million loan.
First one.
The first one, okay.
Right.
All right.
Right. And
Because the process requires us to calculate out what the value over the agreed upon term of the CEA, what the likely value, tax value
right.
would be. And presumably they'll also be able to show us the other part of the capital stack, what else is coming into play to make this project happen.
How do you define additional funding? Because there's equity, there's debt, there's all sorts of,
I was
why we
leaving
have-
it open.
because no project's gonna go without other funding,
Of course,
right?
Right.
So is this a softball or is there?
I would think so.
I hope so. Hope so. But you gotta remember, this is also a learning process for the council when they see this. They wanna see, hey, if I'm putting $1 million in, who else is putting money in here? Yeah. So I think.
They want leverage.
Yeah.
Is there a limit on the CEA funding?
No,
There's
because you,
statutory limit, 100% for 30 years
yeah.
by law, but we've never seen a deal of
It's
of
just,
that term or percentage.
just remember credit enhancement agreement, it is, hey, I'm paying X number of dollars in property taxes. And the CEA says, okay, we're gonna give you a percentage of that back to work so that you can leverage more financing.
Karen, would you consider, to Eric's point, there's always gonna be other funding in the deal. Would you consider requiring a a physical investment in a project equal to what the CEA, the lost revenue to the town is, or some proportion of the lost revenue?
So what do you mean?
The total value of the CEA is $1 million,
Okay.
so the developer needs to invest at least $1 million in
In infrastructure,
infrastructure or
Building
building
costs.
costs or
Yeah.
something.
I think that the other piece of the pie that you can be anything.
Mhm.
It's just, the town's $1 million can't be the
Developer fee.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it can't be the 90% of the project or something like that. You need to show that there's lots of people investing, and that's usually what everybody has done when they've come to us. They've like, okay, we've got this much from this source. We just need X amount of dollars to help leverage those other dollars.
What about, what does below market financing, it answers your question a little bit, because it's specific to, like a financing,
Sure.
isn't that what we're after? Cause I'm concerned too about getting additional funding, if that means leverage, I mean, it could be. It's hard to like correlate that CEA request to actually additional funding.
Okay.
Because it could be, it's helpful to get below market financing. And, it's probably a softball because most projects are gonna have main housing subsidies in them.
Right.
Or it could have federal home loan bank subsidies.
Mm.
And, because I do think it's, depending on how strict a construction you use to find additional funding, it could be awkward.
Okay, so do you have a suggestion to either tighten that up or
Project-
broaden it?
Project would also attract below market financing. That
Oh, okay,
was,
so separate,
not additional financing, but below market financing, so it's very specific.
okay.
That could be.
Bill, just give us, layman, a quick little rundown of what is below market financing.
Well, main housing often provides subsidies at 0%.
Okay.
Well, that's really where, you're not gonna get tax credit deals done. I mean, I suppose let's assume we're talking mostly about tax credit deals.
And I would say translate that into, the dollar value of what it's worth and that.
Yeah, and I think it ought to relate to
You
the.
need a public administration degree.
Right, and remember, they don't have to meet all of these.
Right,
They just have
right.
to meet a selection of them.
Right. But, it motivates people to go out and find below market
Exactly.
financing, and because you could say, yeah, because I got a CEA. My investor says they'll come in for X dollars, that's not additional funding, that didn't do anything for the project.
Okay, so should that be a separate line? Not part of that,
No, I'm just thinking,
Yeah.
it goes to Eric's question about like, additional funding is
okay.
kind of amorphous and.
Should it be additional investments?
Well,
We like them all.
it's.
amorphous is good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
is there?
Unless someone says-
Is there a set of
Sure.
requirements for regular CEA or non-housing CEAs?
Yes,
And with those, is there, if we were talking like French and Spanish, like you might translate from French to Spanish, right? Is there a way to translate from non-housing to housing and maybe add some special things? Look, maybe we don't want to make housing harder,
right,
Right.
right.
We don't- and
We
we
don't.
also want to make, I think we want to make the requirements meaningful,
Correct,
right? So that,
correct,
so that we've got some credibility in the policy.
sure.
And,
And-
it's not just circle your 4 favorite numbers.
Right, right.
Right.
Yeah, so under economic development, there are things like, job creation, infrastructure investment, I don't, Tom, do you want to read
I have
the?
a paper copy here, I can just hand it across, yeah. So they're more finite metrics. They also talk about, the project has to be a minimum of a $2 million project for us to even consider it, those sorts of things.
Yeah. And then, without looking at this
Yeah.
right now, but like, are there things on here that would be hard for housing to do? And we might want to swap out 1 to 1. And,
Right.
and on this list, there's this one, number 4, which talks about specific affordability requirements.
Right,
And maybe we would swap that in exchange for one that's hard to do for housing.
okay, well, I think I
think
took out all the hard things for
Yeah.
the, that were in the economic development piece and said, all right, let's start from scratch
Right.
with the,
Let's
the housing.
create a separate set of criteria that's relevant to affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's our goal.
right,
And you'll notice this one goes so far as to kind of go up with a scoring matrix, depending on the metric that we're asking about. There's certain point values, and I think that gets a little too, too objective.
Yeah.
And we get caught in the weeds, so,
Subjective, yeah.
subjective.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Too mathy.
And I didn't ask that question because I'm opposed to a vagueness of additional funding. Because as I read through the rest of these, like, I think we want to try to make this work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
make hurdles that are insurmountable. And that this may be a softball on purpose, it just may, these are like buzzwords that people like to hear, right?
Right. Yeah, and those the last few, the walkability, the access to local services, some of that is in the economic development piece, but it also seemed to make, it resonated with me with respect to a housing project is that if you're gonna do affordable housing, you want them to be able to get to jobs and other things, so that's why.
Well, those
some of
things are in the
there.
QAP too, so it's highly unlikely that they'll get
But I think
funded.
to the extent that we can reiterate some of the things in the QAP, that should give us the assurance that if we're gonna help them out here, they're likely to score pretty
Yeah.
well there.
Yes,
So I think a downtown, located in a
Sure.
simple downtown, I think might be one we should add.
Yeah, and
Access
so
to
these are
public
just
transit.
bigger than the downtown stuff, but we can put the downtown standards in, yeah.
I would, I know vagueness is nice, right? I would.
Until it is.
Until it's
Right.
not, right, so, like I worry about at least some units. Like I would,
oh, I didn't get to that one yet.
I
That was my next.
like, I would be attracted to setting a specific
Okay.
percentage. And like I don't know, I get anxious about, sufficient access to local services or like, walkable, you know, what is like, there's the project across the street, right? The Avesta project.
Right.
How walkable is it to be on Route 1? It's got a nice parking lot,
Mhm,
there's sidewalks, does that make it walk, like, what's the definition of?
right, it's
And,
vague.
and you can
That's
imagine,
the case.
and you can imagine. A council that's in favor of a project getting behind it. And you can imagine a council that's not in favor of it, really digging in, it's like, oh, there's no way you could walk there, we're not gonna get a CEA.
Right,
Um,
but they can walk to the restaurant, they can walk to all the different things, you know.
right,
But even with this request and even with this process, this is not a right, the council can say no for no reason.
Right, it's a policy, not an ordinance.
Yeah.
too.
But the objectivity and subjectivity of this is
Yeah.
where I get comments around, how many kids you gonna have in this project? You know, those kinds of things start to wander a little bit.
Yeah.
And probably shouldn't be in there. That's, so the more specificity is kind of helpful, and I think, the QAP reference, I mean, Maine Housing struggled with this definition for years. And they came up with something that they use. So I don't know if we need to reinvent that. I mean, it makes sense, right? We want affordable housing projects to be on infrastructure.
So maybe the better way to look at this is not excluding an application because it doesn't score. It's more a matrix or a way for us to compare one project to another.
Well, and it's also a way to give context for the council who's evaluating this. You know, we may not have the right context here, but I'm just going back over like all the discussion that we had, with 3A home. And, these are some of the things that, we were getting pressed by the council to do. So, have we done a fiscal analysis? There are all of these questions about things that, do they belong here? Probably. It's a council thing. I don't know, Jean Marie, if you wanna.
No,
Okay, yeah,
no, I'm just taking this kind
Okay.
of all in and
Yeah.
I keep going. And where's workforce housing? You know me, I'll get hop on there.
don't pick number 4 and you can do it.
But
Right, I mean-
isn't the new, the definition of affordable includes, in the definition is gonna be attached, it
Yeah.
includes workforce housing.
Okay,
We
I would
define,
hope so, but
Yes.
you know me.
Yeah.
It was a separate definition.
Yeah. but under the umbrella of affordable is workforce. And so we can make that clear.
So it is kind of a little bit of an interesting like stress test to this policy or non-ordinance policy is. What could you expect to get approval for? Using different sets of selections, right? And so I think with this. I mean, could you get I don't know, a market rate condo project located just in the right part of town with a nice walking trail that's next to a grocery store? And I think like you could probably pick the right 4 things.
Well,
And then is that an intentional policy outcome?
Well, then that brings up the question, they wouldn't be eligible for, and this is where I don't know housing will live, they wouldn't be eligible for the Main State housing. And so I think that's the bare minimum. I think we say it's not in here because it was a threshold. We're anticipating that you're gonna be in the Main State housing finance stack. Or main housing is gonna be there, and that's the only way, actually. This is where my housing policy goes down. I don't think we can do a credit enhancement agreement
I wonder,
unless
You can,
you can.
yeah,
Okay.
you just, it doesn't, it has to be in a overall TIF district. And
Right.
it can be housing within that TIF district.
I'm wondering if we should come at this slightly different. And forgive me, I'm just gonna give a little bit of background. This policy came about immediately after we did the credit enhancement agreement with the Downs project, and there was a lot of interest and concern. And I think I can say this pretty clearly, there were a number of people on council that said, well, basically, we don't want to approve another one, so we need some defense mechanism to evaluate, but I think the goal of some of them was to make it so difficult that we never do it again. And then affordable housing in the meantime has really been what's dominated the conversation. It's just a round peg through a square hole. It just doesn't fit at all. So I wonder if this approach can be different. So creating more threshold pieces, like to qualify, you must meet our comprehensive plan and those sorts of things. And then these end up being more comparative things. They're information for the council to consider as opposed to kind of making decisions based from, you know what I mean?
So,
So it's almost point scoring. Or
Yeah, I mean,
Public
it's
body-
filling in gaps that their application may not, it's really completing the application so the council really appreciates what the project is and what it brings to town.
and what this first piece is, the way the CEA policy was written was there's a set of objectives, if you will, these 9, whatever we want to call these things, tests. And the applicant writes a letter to Tom saying, here are the things that this project is, brief description, here are the ways that the project meets these objectives and which ones they meet. And then the economic development, he's required 3 out of 6 of the objectives. And so this one, I think we have 4 out of 9. And if they demonstrate that, Tom gets to say, hey, yeah, we're gonna invite you to start the process. And so that's what these are being used for. It's his test
Yeah, thank you.
of
So it is
being
kind
able
of
to
the
move
initial qualifier. Yes, we invite you to make formal application. So these should be fairly broad and kind of light requirements.
As I'm hearing Karen talk about this, and we get the benefit of being in the housing business.
Right.
Right? So we know the nuances, but our audience for this aren't people in that.
Right,
That's right.
This is for the council who doesn't understand this.
Right.
So what we're trying to hit are all the things they might ask. Tell
Right.
me about leverage, tell me about the location, tell me
Right.
about, so we're just sort of creating a framework for a potential applicant to follow to be successful in front of the council. Yeah, yes.
So here's the things to care about.
And it does help. I mean, when we were working through this with 3i Home, I said down with Corey and we sort of went through all of these and I'm like, here are the pieces that I think the council's interested in hearing about. And it's probably not the same things that you want to hear about. Yeah, so it's trying to do both. It's trying to just give them a good story to tell. And at one point, I think somewhere in the application, I think there's a thing that says, tell me what's extraordinary about your project. That's pretty wide open, and yet.
That was a softball for 3 eye home.
Yeah, exactly. It worked really well for that
It
one.
works well.
Yeah.
But there's gonna be people on the council that aren't gonna really understand it.
And there are people on the council who are never gonna vote for it, even if it
They're not
was
gonna
slam
vote
dunk.
for it,
Right,
doesn't
right.
matter what you do.
Right.
So,
So-
no.
With these,
no.
with one council's favor, almost unanimously for the 3 or 4 that we've done in modern history is an understanding that the QAP is so important to getting the major funding to make
Right.
projects happen. And that the conversation, interesting over the last 2 has been around, all right, what's the shortest term and the least percentage to be able to get you the points you need to be able to score?
Right,
As opposed to, should we be doing this? It's really kind of shaping it, limiting the exposure to the town, but still giving the applicant what they need to actually make the budget happen.
Yeah, it gives them the starting point to say whether or not they should even invest the time to send, to craft a letter to send to you to know if they're. So like, is there even a shot at this? I mean, I'm certain that the last 3 or 4, Southgate, Jocelyn, Village Commons, all would qualify
Yes,
Mhm.
and all would fit all these buckets. I
Yeah.
imagine 3 I home did too.
absolutely.
oh, yeah.
And so if that's the type of housing we're looking for, then this is the roadmap of that. So I don't.
Is there a state of the world, or is it too ambitious, that we would encourage or accept, or maybe even approve an application that wasn't going to main housing for tax credits and that just had some regular old private investment with loans and grants to build affordable housing?
It's a great question, Mike, because I think that's going to become more.
Are there any of those?
Yeah,
None of those 4 were, but we are actually looking at ways to do it without main housing.
You still have to go to main housing to get this. You still, they approved the TIF.
Right,
Yeah.
that's why I was thinking, that's why I was
But
saying
their
criteria.
funding may not-
but
Right,
without,
yeah,
but without
right,
tax
agreed,
credits,
agreed.
yeah.
It may not be a QAP type
Right,
project,
agreed.
it could be something else.
Can I ask a really stupid question? Please.
My stupid question.
Number 9, under what's needed in the application, are you allowed to ask about children? That's like forbidden under federal law.
Where's that?
It's-
That's under the.
Remember the audience, that's one of the first questions. Many of them are smart enough not to ask it so specifically, but that is a really important consideration.
Oh, yeah.
What are the impacts on the schools?
That's,
Well, yeah, but
Change
you
into that
can't
then.
say that, but you cannot say children. I'm telling you right now. We'll be at the end of a lawsuit so fast,
Yeah.
it'll spin from the feds.
then, I think I think that needs to be changed in the requirements in terms of just telling us what, tell me the demographics of your project.
But what is the angle?
well, you
What
gotta
are
be
we,
careful.
what are we asking for?
The angle was, if the finance committee and or the council is gonna require a fiscal impact. We've managed to say, particularly, number 1, we didn't have a policy in place. And number 2, like with 3i Home, there was a lot of pressure to do this. With 3i Home, fortunately, they're in the downs and we did a fiscal impact of the downs, which was holistic in its nature. So in fact, they were already included in a fiscal analysis. So it was our contention that we didn't need to do something individually.
So this group might say, if you asked us, that people who qualify for affordable housing don't generally cost any more in life than people who
There
don't.
you go,
And therefore, the target market doesn't matter.
right, and they could be older.
Should be surprised, nor should we be ashamed to ask the question to ponder what the cost to serve of something is. I think that's a fair question.
Unless there's
Is it the senior
unless there's an as of right to build.
But they're asking for something that we don't need to give. I think it's a fair question. We should anticipate future councils will want to know that.
They are asking for something from us, but they're also committing to build us something that's deed restricted to meet a public purpose that we're asking for. Right, deed restricted affordable housing. Right.
Yeah, I think. I can tell you that we took a left turn with Village Commons across the street and moved it to senior. Because of the environment that we were involved in this town at that time related to impacts to schools.
I'm all for like the developer making that kind of decision, but I don't wanna make it de facto as part of the policy.
Right,
And if the developer wants to navigate that and, you know, try to read the tea leaves and the wind's blowing, which is, it's.
Could be asked a question
Yeah,
somewhere along the line.
yeah, but I don't wanna build, you know, bake it in.
Southgate was a total opposite. You watch the bus at Southgate at the end of school. Like half the bus unloads at Southgate. I mean,
that's awesome.
it is, but it was a different environment at that time.
I know.
Built Southgate.
Well, that's page 3 of the tax credit application.
We've had questions.
I
asked
just
about
don't
the
want it in the
projects.
application.
Do we expect to have a higher than average pressure on fire and EMS, given the age of the residents?
Yeah.
And what if the developer says no, and there's a disagreement? I mean, those are kind of the objective things, and you're right,
Right.
maybe we would, you know, we'll never get there, but I don't wanna bake it in, so to speak, and,
No,
you know,
fair enough.
lead the council. It'd be nice if this was a very affirmative
Right.
and navigable thing.
Here, and I should preface, our strong preference would be not to have any policy. and let
I
the
think
council
policy
decide.
doesn't- I think developers are motivated by this kind of thing, you know, they've got a path.
Yeah.
And they're not coming in and,
Predictable process.
Yes.
yeah, that's huge.
Well, it seems like from past discussions with the council, one of the things they either craved or used as a excuse or something, was that there was no path for them to walk down.
Hmm.
And, yeah, for housing, and this certainly gives a path, which I think is really good.
Okay,
We
so,
can lead them to water.
okay, so we want to strike under the what's needed in the application. Is we're striking number 9. I think we can still
Well, you
ask,
put a number of residents, but just don't mention school age.
They could just say services impacted. Isn't that still part of the service?
Yeah, whatever, just don't talk about children.
Right.
well, I also don't want them to,
Protected
get-
classes, stay away from.
yeah, well, I don't want them to be sucked into the vortex of the fiscal impact either, so, we want to help them out.
Oh, tell them to suck it up, it's like, come on.
Yeah,
Let them know, Jim.
All the boomers, we're gonna be gone in
They're gonna
about
be after
20 years, we need
Yeah.
kids.
so.
Gonna change with the next council.
Wasn't there someplace where we talk about marketing? I mean, what's the market of this project?
Yeah, there is.
Marketability.
No, what's the target market?
Oh,
And so, you know what, I think maybe we can leave it at that. Tell us
Yeah.
what's your target market?
Right.
Who are you building these units for?
Right.
And, yeah, why don't we do that? We'll strike number 9 altogether and we already asked. Well, let me go back up to, sort of the review process, because this one is important to the second piece. And so this says Setco helps applicant understand the process, but that's just because that was baked in.
Yeah.
What the revision that I proposed to the council is Tom is gonna choose a staff liaison. It could be me, it could be, somebody in the planning department, but they're gonna be that contact person for the project to see this through. It's likely me at this point, but you never know, at some point, there may be a housing planner hired or anything else, but, so I've removed Setco as the only thing. It's now Tom chooses who the liaison's gonna be. And then after that, and our job as the liaison, at least that's the way I see it, is, to go through the application with them, not just to hand it to them, but here are the things, here's what we've learned before. Here's how, if they're stumped on a question, here's how I would say you might want to think about answering that question. Here are the qualities of the project. So we're not just trying to say, here, go forth and come back when you're done. We're there to really help them through that and give them whatever guidance can be helpful for them without writing the application for them. It's a delicate line.
Karen, you're working on the first sheet, right?
I'm working off the first,
So,
yeah,
Brian, then you can just go to the top of the document.
Yeah.
So you know.
All right. Oh, there you go. All
There you
right.
go. Who
reviews, right. So we start with that, and I work with them to help them with composing the letter to Tom. If they're gonna give me or whoever the liaison is, their draft letter after we've discussed it, I'm gonna review it and say, you know what? You need to tighten this up, or this may not say what you think it's gonna say, so I'm helping try to target their information so that Tom gets to yes. And then once Tom says yes, then Tom has to notify the council that there's a housing alliance, or I'm sorry, there's an application coming forth, and he's gonna notify the housing alliance as well. And then assigns a staff coordinator. Once the preliminary application is in, we're bringing it here first. And this is a question that I have. In the current credit enhancement agreement or policy, it says the application goes to a joint session of the council and SEDCO, because it's economic development. So I'm asking you guys, do you prefer reviewing the application here amongst yourselves? Or would you rather do it with the council in a joint meeting, or you review it and then you come to a joint meeting? It's really, I think, up to you guys to say which, how you get the better feedback for everyone.
Strikes me the alliance could review it as an alliance and provide a recommendation to council. You certainly could appear or direct your chairperson or representative to appear on your behalf, but I think requiring a joint meeting, the council's already booked so much. Another meeting is probably not helpful.
Just give me a sense, Tom, how many of these do you get a year?
We get one a year, it'll be surprising.
Okay, so this isn't,
Small, but
No.
they're not knocking down your door.
Why does the council review before finance committee?
That's the way they set it up.
And I wonder if finance even needs to be involved in this.
that's what I was just gonna ask. Why
Let's,
are they-
let's replace finance with housing alliance.
I'm all about streamlining this thing, so
Yeah.
you just go to a joint meeting.
Exactly.
So go directly to a joint
Council.
meeting of council and the housing alliance.
Yeah,
Or whatever,
that's too,
yeah.
whatever, yeah.
I'd recommend we remove finance committee altogether from this process.
But would we do it for both economic development? Okay,
Just for
For the housing.
for the
Housing
housing.
fund.
okay,
And then require the application to be shared and reviewed at this level.
Yeah.
And invite comment from the alliance. All of this is just building a body of information for the council to consider it when it's ready for them.
Which is what we've historically done.
Yeah, it's just not
Written letters, or
codified.
Brian's gone
Right.
and spoken on behalf.
Right.
Not
right,
always for CEA, but sometimes for the
Yeah,
project.
but codifying kind of the modern
Yeah.
practice, yeah.
okay. Done. Okay. And then, so Tom, the scoring sheet that the finance committee was charged with, which is not my favorite thing. It's just not. Because I think scoring like that is so subjective and you get people from all different perspectives, but it's something that they really liked. So would you send the scoring sheets to the council and the housing alliance?
Who's they?
Who does the scoring?
Well, that's the question.
If we took out finance committee.
Yeah.
Who's they?
Presumably it would
Who
be the
runs
alliance who
scoring?
did the scoring.
I think the finance committee really.
You.
Well,
Can I ask-
we're done with the finance
Yeah.
committee.
What is the purpose, what is the end game for the score? Is there gonna get cut off, like, if it's below 40, you don't win, if it's 41, you win?
I would
know.
think you'd have to make the scoring relevant.
Right, that's what I'm wondering, like, what is the point of the scoring, I
Yeah.
guess?
I'd rather make it more qualitative, whether you meet
Exactly.
4 or 5 of these 9 or 10. As opposed to, assigning a point value and it's gonna be.
You got a
minimum
4 out of
score.
5.
Yeah,
And I
it's
can-
just, it's crazy. I don't wanna call anybody's stuff crazy, but it's hard to do. I do understand why they like it on occasion because it feels like it's more objective to have this score. Oh, look, we've got a
Scoring
score.
is so subjective.
I know.
We've never actually used it for that purpose.
Well, I was told that you guys
The
did.
selling piece.
I was told you guys did it on, the South Portland Affordable Housing, Jocelyn, that they did it informally.
I don't recall that.
Yeah, we did not do it for,
So if we're gonna, I mean, to be super cynical.
Yeah.
If we're gonna score, but not really use it, is
What's
this
the-
just to pretend that we're gonna do what people in the council wanna do regardless? Like, and feel good about it? Or like,
turn those eyes
Well,
out.
no, I mean, like, should we?
Talk to short time.
I mean.
Sure.
So here's what I know, Maine Housing does this every year, this QAP, and they score it every year. Everybody does their own self-scoring, and everybody comes up with different scores.
Yeah.
Oh,
In a
yeah.
process that has been going on for decades.
Right.
It's still fraught. with
Scoring is
discrepancies.
so.
I mean, I think it's either
So
like
is
pass,
that, I
fail.
mean, is that the way
Yeah.
of saying you get to the answer you wanna get to, one way or the other?
But the reason,
Yeah.
the reason the QAP has to have some sort of measure like that is that you've got 50 applications, you need to find a way to
Yeah.
justify the 6 that get it, right?
But, right.
So,
but if-
but we're not comparing one against another
no.
Right,
head to head.
I'll tell you though, as a developer coming into town where, yeah, this deal either makes it and works financially or has $1 million gap without a CEA. It's really important to me to know whether I've got, a chance of this passing or not. So, and if I know, if I get a 50 in my self-score, I'm good to go. Or if I get a 20, I've got a real uphill battle. That's useful. To add some predictability,
but
unless the scoring doesn't matter.
yeah,
Or unless your developer's not sophisticated enough to self-score accurately, right?
Yeah,
I don't know if it becomes better to assess a potential deal and its potential to achieve a CEA by conversation with Karen, Tom, and others, rather than trying to do a scoring, I don't know.
I'd like to think this is a way of really making sure the application is complete and thorough.
Yeah.
right.
And that these should get time in front of council, and really the discussion is around the actual terms, the percentage, the length.
The
Those
developer,
sorts of things.
the developer has to sell us.
Right,
That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
They gotta sell to us as to why does this make sense? Why do we want to invest in this in town?
So Jeever, can I just challenge that and just think about whether, so
No,
I see that if we're
No.
building warehouses and building whatever skyscrapers.
Why
But if we have a policy imperative to create more affordable housing,
yeah,
don't we want to be removing obstacles to it? And I mean, almost trying to recruit people to use these things and making it as easy as possible.
so what's that
To-
gonna
to
do
use
with
the store.
scoring?
In some senses, maybe we should be not giving this away, but really encouraging and making it as easy as possible and having it.
Are you aware of any other municipalities that promoted in such a way?
No, but that's just because I'm not aware of what other people are doing.
No, as a
But I
counselor,
know that
as a counselor, I don't care what your freaking score is. Tell me why you want this and why does it make
Yeah.
sense?
okay, so
Anyway,
maybe
Well,
we
yeah.
use Jean Marie's approach which is if we're taking it out of finance, then there's no scoring.
I would recommend that's the way we go.
Hmm,
We have these bullet points, right?
Yep.
We're gonna give them.
presentation.
and say
I
how
mean, you
many-
gotta hit on certain
Yeah,
things, we
right.
told you what we're interested in knowing,
Yeah.
now you gotta sell
If there's a council in place and that council is not engaging with this, the word will be out.
it. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of, Scarborough feels like it's open for business right
right now it
now.
does. Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that it will, is predict, you can't prescribe that going forward, that's the problem.
Right.
Is this different than an affordable housing TIF?
This isn't full out.
This is.
Yeah, it has to be a.
Yeah,
to-
okay.
Yeah, we're just taking the
Yeah.
CEA out of it. If the CEA passes muster, if there's not a TIF in place, we would do it.
And so there's no way to create something that's just as of right for people who come in and do, where if you're doing affordable housing, period, you are entitled to a tax deal.
You can do that in the downtown district or Huggins Parkway, because you've got established TIFs.
Like, well, so I mean, I guess to your earlier question, Tom, in Michigan, if you are doing an affordable housing deal, you automatically get a pilot treatment, payment in lieu of taxes. With a certain
That's
part.
probably a bunch of state law in Maine.
It is, yeah.
Constitutionally, we need to tax at 100%. And if there's any deviation, there's only a few ways you can deviate from that, and this is
This is
one.
Yeah.
one of them,
And
right?
they've got to be decided on a case by case basis, they can't be a blanket.
Yeah, we have towns that do it very different all over.
Yeah.
We
there
have
were
some
towns-
pilots, we have some that
But-
won't touch it, we have some that are full.
Mm,
I've had pilots, so pilots are only good for council to council,
Oh, yeah.
I've had,
really?
yes,
Have you ever had them pulled back?
yes,
Oh,
Really?
yeah, I'm sure.
yeah,
Oh, Jesus.
and so,
Portland now is considering
Wow.
some sort of service tax
Hmm.
for nonprofits,
Oh, my God.
mm,
which obviously is not always all affordable housing.
Yeah.
so you can do a pilot and you get,
They're after
fingers
healthcare.
crossed that there's no change in the regime. And then there has
Good
been,
luck with that.
well, it's happened,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
so anyway.
Just as an aside, there was some recent changes to the TIF law, and I'm not fully versed in that, but it's enabled. TIFs have always ended at 30 years max.
Yeah.
There's now the ability to extend beyond 30 for, I think, another 15 on top of that. For very specific purposes,
Hmm.
one of which is affordable housing.
Interesting.
So that's something as an alliance, maybe I want to just understand
Mm,
more about.
Yeah.
Because we do have a TIF that's nearing the end of its term. Maybe we should talk about extending that for this
Ah.
purpose.
Okay, so in terms of how this review process is gonna happen, it's really gonna go. Tom informs both the council and the Housing Alliance that he's invited an application. When they're done their preliminary application, we're gonna take it to the Housing Alliance. And you're gonna make a recommendation to the council. Then is there then a joint workshop for the Housing Alliance and the council to discuss? Or are you saying go directly into, the approval process?
Council's gonna have questions,
Yeah,
mhm.
so somebody from the Housing Alliance or the Housing Alliance.
I like the workshop
Okay.
idea.
Yeah.
Okay,
Good luck at that meeting. Yeah, no.
Brian.
Go, send Brian.
All I can say is I'm-
Make sure you schedule.
yeah, okay, so that makes it easy, and then the, right.
think.
Aaron's awesome.
And then, hey, it's a lot easier than it was when we walked in the door, so I'm pretty pleased about that. So then, there's a workshop and the council, number one, they're gonna give feedback, but the Housing Alliance in the memo to, or the, information to the council is gonna say, hey, we liked X, Y, and Z of this, we think this is good, we might suggest you ask the applicant to do, these couple of things, would make it stronger. And the council's gonna have some suggestions at the workshop, and then the applicant is gonna come back with a final application, which would then start, the council process.
Yeah.
Set,
Right.
see, okay?
Yeah, so then this really kind of turns into what an application ought to contain and then be evaluated based on without suggesting any weight to the applicants, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you want to, unless there's, and if there are some standards that you want to think about and say, hey, why don't we add? Because, we're not asking them to meet all of these things, but if there's something else that's missing, let's add it. There's no reason not to add something else that would help. Excuse me, that would help them explain their project better. Because that's really, I like the way you said that, is this just gives them it's a guidepost. Talk about, how you're doing these types of things, and it gives everybody a good picture of what's going on.
Is there something on here that talks about how it meets the requirements for the state's affordable housing tip rules?
If there is, I just didn't put it in this because that was a given, you must do these two things.
Yeah, so that might be like a nice piece of the narrative.
Yeah.
And then the very last one, 15, written explanation of how the CEA fulfills different point values. In the main housing application. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking, Brian, but.
No, so I'm thinking more of the affordable housing tip rules.
Right.
And which I think is sort of the
That's
umbrella set of rules that would govern the
Exactly,
CEA.
They're two fundamental pieces like.
Yeah, and so how do you fit into this regime?
Mhm.
But
And then,
those are threshold questions that need to be, you can't even make application. I would-
right.
They-
So
You know what, we should make that explicit, because I don't think I have it in there.
that might be kind of a nice place setting for the council to say, oh, this is why we're allowed to do this.
Right.
And now here are the details about the specific project. To help walk the council down the path, Jim, right?
Right, yeah,
To the
just,
water.
just above this in the process says you have to do these two things, which is.
You can hire me
Let's put
for
it
the
all
water
here.
response.
Just think
Oh,
about,
lovely.
Brian's earlier comment, just made me think, the comprehensive plan very clearly calls out affordable housing and support of it as a very clear priority. In a separate vision statement around that. Unlike economic development, tips per se aren't stated as such. So I was just thinking in my own mind and council, why is this process different than the economic development? It's really because we've got, our comprehensive plan we support this conceptually.
Right.
And this is a vehicle to advance that policy.
Right.
Mm,
And so there are two pieces that I just want to call to your attention to see whether they should be yanked out. That explanation of the point values for main housing. So I think when we were doing Korea Home, we got caught up in that. Well, wait, if we give you 15%, you'll get your 1 point. If we do 20%, or if we do more.
It's 15.75%.
Yeah, so I think that would have helped the council in the beginning if we had laid that all out for them.
Yeah.
And so I just want to check in, does that make sense? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, every point matters, so.
Right.
Oh, absolutely,
Right,
yeah.
right,
There were 24 pre-applications this year, so
And the
every
council's,
point's gonna
the
matter.
council's purpose in that conversation was, we want to give you what you need to be successful, but we don't want to give you any more than you need.
right.
It
So,
was well intentioned, it came off kind of
yeah,
cold.
yeah. And so if they lay that out up front and say, you know what, we need to hit the 2 points or the 3 points, and here's why. And then the other thing that I actually talked with Corey Fellows about, because I wanted to know what he thought of it, is putting a time frame for the application. So it seems to take us a while to do these things. So, is it, if you're planning on going through the fall competition for main housing, then we need to see this application in fill in the blank. Is it June? Like, there has to be a threshold. You should start now so that we can finish in time for the application. And he actually liked that, because he felt like that gives the council as well as the applicant this time frame to understand how important it is to get the approval by this date.
Mm.
And so you don't want to put a specific date, but I think you want to say 3 months before the,
Why don't we have, as part of the application, be very clear what the deadlines are that they need to work toward, and then we'll have to see if our process can
Main
You get
housing
there.
changes their application day, so I think.
And that's fine, so it's good to be relative, you know,
3
you,
months,
you
whatever.
need to start before. And I think that, I think we can say, we're not gonna turn you down and say no because you're too close to the deadline, but we are gonna say, we can't guarantee
That it'll be
that
done.
it'll be done in time. But if,
But you're right, I don't remember which one, but they were under a deadline to make an application and they desperately needed council to take action so they could claim
right,
the 2 or 3 points.
yeah, and
We
we,
were under the gun.
yeah, and.
So I think just them being very clear up front in their application, what their timeline is, and I'd even expand it to really understand in a perfect world, what is their whole project timeline? You know,
Right.
Planning, board submission, local approvals.
I will say, it is unfortunate when you can't get a town council to make a decision in time,
Yeah,
but it's not uncommon.
Right,
And it's not Scarborough alone, it's a lot of
Sure.
municipalities. We almost plan on it, that there's gonna be a project or two along the way that there's just not gonna, it's not gonna.
It's
It's
something's
not
gonna
potentially,
happen.
yeah, there's other things that distract them, there's councils that change and need to get reorganized, there's all
Right.
sorts of very good reasons that we can't.
but I
I
think
think the guidelines are good, like here's an expected timeline, but I wouldn't put it, as you
Sure.
said, no guarantees.
right,
But I think probably the critical timeline for this is when they need to make an application to the state.
Correct.
Everything else kind of flows
and
after that.
I mean, they do it
I
with,
think
they
it's
do it with
3
their
months.
approvals. I mean, they know they have to get local approvals to be competitive. So they're certainly laying that out ahead of time.
Yeah, and I think that's the other question too. I think we don't. They don't have to have had all of their approvals done. They could start this process earlier.
Karen, what does it look like if you keep it pretty amorphous, but require a meeting with the designated
Mhm.
town person, say 6 months before the application deadline to kind of talk through a
Yeah.
timeline? One thing I think about is there was a recent round where there's gonna be a 9% round, and then there was a 4% round with subsidy, and then things changed, and things just got really changey, right? And maybe it was even the 3I project where they were gonna fund it one way and then fund it another way and then fund it another way.
They tried it one way or unsuccessful, so they repackaged it.
It was all very rapid fire.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of that was around the state housing credit program. And they wanted to be able to have the cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Be able to
The state did.
stay,
Yeah.
you know, and see the whole pipeline
Mm.
and then move the pieces around so that they could maximize deployment. So that was a lot of confusion around
Mhm.
that, and they weren't clear.
Yeah.
And the statute calls them to be clear, and they weren't,
Mm.
so there's a lot of backpedaling.
Okay, so I think we've got some good feedback. If you guys, oh,
Here, just one last thing, on number one, would folks be comfortable with this being usable for preserving affordable housing as well?
well, it's the new value
I think
issue
so.
with the TIF, with the CEA.
Oh,
You
tell me
can't-
more.
If you've already got, the only way the CEA works is if there's new value created.
It's true,
Oh.
it's true.
It's only based on that increment in the value.
Right.
But a
Well,
reinvestment
yeah, so,
arguably would put
yeah,
new value in, but it's typically often with a different entity.
yep,
It's often you'd want to restart the term. So I think you're probably not extending, you're probably creating a new one that would sit on top of the old one. I guess.
so if there happened to be an existing affordable housing or complex or something around that somebody wanted to buy, put tax credits on to renovate and preserve the affordability of.
See, buying it doesn't create value
Renovate.
necessarily.
And
Renovating, it's the
Renovating it.
renovation. You
If
were-
they're,
And then
if they're at
extending the
30 years, they're gonna have to reinvest.
Yeah,
It's gonna create value.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we are silent on this, they could potentially come forward.
Probably
But
20 years from that question being asked at this point.
Maybe.
yeah, right.
I mean, I think of, well, yeah, all right,
Your question though is, it would not increase supply. So
Right.
if somebody bought a 30-unit building, and put $6 million in renovation.
right.
You've created
Right.
$6 million of value, you haven't added a
But
single
if the
unit.
proposition is we lose deed restricted affordable housing,
So maybe it's
Could we say
increase or
supply
maintain,
or,
increase or maintain.
yeah, that's fair.
yeah, or increase by deed restricted affordable housing?
And then one thing, it doesn't have to be in here, but what I would ask you is at some point, if maybe we could work together to, it'd be great to isolate a series of our housing strategy that's sort of laid out across several different documents. And it might be nice to have that all combined into a single document, like here, if the council has housing goals, here's what the comp plan says, here's what anything from the Housing Alliance we've done, just lay it all out so we can hand it to them.
There's the planner. She's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, just, and it's not necessarily in here, but we do ask them to talk about how they're gonna meet housing policy. Seems like we should not make them go through 25
Give them the
documents.
goalposts.
Yeah, here, find the housing policy and all these
Tell us
documents.
what it is.
Okay,
Can I ask a question about compliance and so forth? I mean, this all presumes that they're gonna stay compliant,
Tom's
but
favorite.
yeah. I mean, if I'm on the council or I'm a developer, I wanna know, I'd like to know, I mean, I see the rules, but who's gonna enforce them? And we don't need to get into this now, I don't mean to derail all this good discussion, but that kind of predictability is, and maybe this probably isn't the document to do.
No,
this,
it's
but-
not. The credit enhancement agreement typically spells out
See.
what those compliance, annual reporting requirements are. Quite honestly, we rely heavily on main housing.
Yeah,
There's
everybody else is
other,
involved. Yeah, I
we're
get
reporting
that.
to others
And you
that are
should.
far more interested than we are.
You might want to say that.
Yeah.
Because there are enough people certainly looking at this that it doesn't take the time. But if somebody should be giving somebody some assurance that they're looking at it.
And I think we've got some standard boilerplate language in all those agreements that say that even separate and apart from these annual reporting requirements, we have the ability to request
Yeah.
at any time.
All right.
I think we've got the language there, whether we actually have ever used it.
That's
We
okay,
need to,
it's okay.
it's there.
I have a question. Number 4, keeping it affordable in the future, how do you do it? How do you answer that?
oh, that's
Is that just like,
deed restricted or how they,
Your best
how they're
guess?
doing it?
No,
No, it's they have to tell us what they're gonna do. Are they restricting, is it deed restricted? Is it?
how do you keep it affordable in the future when you don't know?
It's typically a year limit.
It's not in perpetuity, it's
Yeah.
typically 30 years.
Well, there's tranches for it. I think it's points, right? So if you do 45, you do 90.
main housing has different limits on the credits versus the debt. So they have affordability
Right.
limits on different.
But Bob, to
tranches.
answer your question, our ability, our interest and our ability to enforce would begin and end with begin at the term of the CEA and end at the end of it. We wouldn't have the legal or financial authority to
But it's a complete,
require it.
the CEA would not be longer than
No,
the period of time that is guaranteed to be affordable.
yeah, I think the shortest I've ever seen is 30 years.
And
Well, just the tax credit is by statute, 30-year credit. So,
Well, I just look at it as affordable for the people that are staying there. How do you do that when you got inflation? How do they answer that question?
because they'll charge 1 to 30% of their income for
That-
rent.
Yeah, it's different.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I didn't mean to take up all of your meeting, I'm sorry. I will make these changes and send it back to you guys. And I don't think we have to necessarily meet again, but 'cause we're gonna.
We'll meet again.
Right.
We're back.
Me,
We'll be back.
but I will send it back to you guys. And
Super.
Tom, we meet with the finance committee second week of September?
Mhm.
Okay.
And it might just be, well, you and I will talk offline, but we could simply say that we've checked in here, we've collected input, and we'll be producing a new draft.
They're gonna love you saying, oh, we don't need the fence.
Yeah, well,
I think they'll
I think
understand.
Chief Marie said, you don't, we don't. need
I
Well,
will say-
only because it's a subset of the town council.
I will say
Highly
it's
esteemed
probably-
town council.
why even tell them we're taking them out?
We'll never know.
Because they're the ones that are gonna send this to the council for the update.
Yeah, the point is that there's a group that's working on this, so when it lands on council's agenda, it's fully,
Not like
fully
it's
developed,
never
it's
been
been
vetted.
vetted,
Right.
it's ready for prime time.
And, and it's probably simpler than some of the economic development projects that have all sorts of,
Oh, yeah.
let's do them.
I'll talk to the chair.
So Brian, how do you suggest we wade into this other topic? We don't really we haven't framed it up. And this is really just expanding a conversation that you and I have had on countless occasions to spread the wealth and bring others up to speed and start some conversation at this level.
Is that the unintended?
This is the unintended consequences of our existing affordable housing program, our existing for sale affordable housing program. Well, Tom, I think maybe we can tee it up a little bit with what the problem is, and I can,
And we mentioned a
Mention-
real life example that probably is the best way to demonstrate.
yes, and kind of a prequel to it, which is to say, what you're about to hear is terrible and unfortunate, and
But it's life.
is happening in just 2 out of the 6 cases of.
Only because those are the only two that have sold.
That's right. So, I guess the reason I say that is because we can, with some policy changes, we can prevent this from happening on, the other 2/3 of the portfolio and prevent it from happening on future houses and, or come to the conclusion that it'll never happen again because we'll get lucky. So with that, Tom,
Oh, I thought you were gonna take it out.
that's the prequel. And I'll let you went to the main. event.
Well, the issue that we found ourselves in, there's 7 different, it's a combination of condos and single family homes in the Downs that have deed restricted. 2 of those have changed ownership. So we went through the initial round of purchase. Now 2 of them have resold. And so we've worked with sellers and buyers and brokers and mortgage lenders. And it's never easy, so we put it that way. Both buyers and sellers, some are a little more tuned in to what they signed on to, others are seemingly oblivious to surprised that there was any restriction. But really, these folks find themselves as a victim of buying at incredibly low interest rate time.
Oh, really?
And selling at an not incredibly, but historically higher than they bought, let's say that. And also a red hot real estate market around them. And so they in part have unreasonable expectations of what they can sell for. And then when they factor in the limitations that this program imposes, in at least the most recent case, Brian, the person couldn't sell the house now for what they bought it for. In fact, I think it was a $40,000 underwater.
Because of the rates.
Because of the rates, the buying
rates,
power,
yeah.
when you get, yeah.
In this case, it happens to be because of the rates. Hypothetically, it eventually it could also be, it probably will also be, because of HOA fees. Right, so we've got a new development that likely had low HOA fees
Oh,
into the
right.
future.
Then they've got to.
They likely will grow, and that becomes part of the total housing cost. And so for all of these people, that'll become an issue as well. So,
So what happened with the person that was 40 under, so to speak?
she's still a resident of Scarborough.
Yeah, this woman is inquired, she's
That's not
thinking
I
of
remember her
selling.
talking to us.
Her circumstances have changed, she's that she's remarried, but she has the ability to move to another
House, yeah.
residence, and was just starting to inquire about selling her house, and with the revelation that she would potentially lose as much as 40,000, she's obviously not gone forward, but.
So she's on the
it's-
hook for that 40,000?
If she decides to sell
if she decided.
She's limited to sell it to a qualified buyer.
Right,
for
Does
a
it,
qualified price.
it has to stay affordable
Yes.
yes,
Yes,
for a certain amount of time.
For the, that's right,
for 30 years.
for the remainder of 30 years.
The more.
Michaela's trying to speak.
Sorry. It's awkward coming in from the video then, but I thought there was a situation too where there wasn't a resale. Somebody had reached out, I think it was this spring, about selling. And she was, because of the interest rates at the time being so high, it was going to be underwater as well, but she hadn't bought and
Right.
already. There was one other person that had just bought originally, and that was popping up too.
That's right. Yeah, and so maybe we should just take a step back. I've sought advice from Brian on these sales that actually have gone through. And the way our program works is that the homeowner needs to advise us that they wish to sell.
Mhm.
Say, that's good. And our obligation is to advise them what to make sure I use the right term,
The maximum purchase
the
price.
maximum below price.
Yeah,
Now, Michaela will tell you in the real estate world, the broker will say, well, what does that mean? Is that what I can list it for? And effectively, that is kind of where the conversation
Right.
is at that stage. So then they go out and market the house at this rate, but then the final details matter who that buyer is, what their income is,
Right.
because it's all about the unique circumstances of a buyer. So down payment matters, interest rate matters, so on and so forth. So they come back to us, and I think in both cases, they came back with a couple of different options. I've got these two buyers. No, actually, they came with a preferred buyer. We'd like to sell to this person. To which we say, well, we need to see the financials to verify, is this a qualified buyer? And the one instance I'm thinking of, they were just barely, but they were qualified. And so the difference between what we told her she could sell for, I think the number was 272, and what she ultimately sold for at 340 was all a function of the uniqueness of the buyer she found.
Yes.
The buyer's financing.
Buyer's financing.
Yeah.
So the two that resold, were they underwater as well, or is this the only underwater one is the person who's still holding on to it?
Still holding on to it.
So the two that resold didn't.
No, in fact,
They
they
had a
made
good point.
windfall.
They made.
Yeah.
They made windfall profits, and that didn't feel right to us.
No.
So, I mean, we, in a couple of years, we see the pendulum swing
Yeah.
from buyers making handsome profit, and no one really wants to deny someone's ability of capitalizing on that, but by the same token,
Right,
it didn't feel right. And then here, it really doesn't feel right that someone is played by the rules and feels trapped in their home. And at least my conception of this project, we didn't want anyone to be harmed by it. We
Right.
wanted to help.
right.
so the ones that sold and they made a profit, rates were lower when they sold.
Yeah.
So the issue is now that. And most of these are at, the ones that we have still in the books are at lower rate.
Yeah, they're probably in the threes.
Right. So the issue is, we're qualifying. Establishing price based on market rate versus the rate that is on the mortgage.
Mhm.
So that's what we're trying. Do we adjust that? You know,
Well, we
when
don't have the ability legally to adjust that.
Without changing the policy? So, yeah.
Well, it's a
Does it have-
recorded document against each deed. So, I mean, if we can come up with solutions in that document, we would, I guess, have to go back out and renegotiate, or
Only 5 people left.
that's true. And I think if it's a fix to their benefit, they're likely to say yes.
Yeah.
So it's not impossible, but it's not easy either.
So I just wondering, the people who sold and made a profit also played by the rules.
That's right.
Right.
Right,
Yep.
they just, they
Yeah.
sold at a low
The
rate.
timing, right? It's real estate.
That's right.
Exactly.
That's right.
Like,
No, but
this doesn't-
intuitively, when people look around and see this white hot real estate market.
Right.
And can't, not only can they not take advantage of it, they're actually being penalized because of these unique circumstances. And I understand they're adults, they bought into a program and this is life, but
And most people gain their wealth through their equity that they build.
Yeah, but I think that if we ran the it'd be interesting to see if we ran the numbers for the people that bought the original owners. My understanding was that they were underwater also. That was That was my understanding, but maybe I'm incorrect.
All I know is they sold it for considerably more than they bought it for,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, I'm not talking about the person that just recently bought within the past couple of years. I'm talking about the people that are original owners from when it was first built.
I'd be surprised.
You mean when rates would have been higher?
Yeah, no, so when they were originally built back in, what was it, 2019, maybe? I can't
Yeah.
remember. But we had that person reach out a little while ago that was an original owner, and was looking to sell, and because of the rates being higher, she was gonna be just under what she had bought it for originally.
She's actually, interestingly, I think this property, the one inquiring, is the second owner herself, Michaela.
Okay, it wasn't it was somebody I heard it from, so I don't know, I wasn't involved in that situation, but I just remember looking at the spreadsheet that Brian had made and kind of playing around with the numbers, because there were two separate people we were talking about at the time. And one I thought was original. I didn't think that she had purchased. One I know for sure had, the one that had bought it for 340 or whatever it was there. But the other one I didn't think so, but I could be wrong.
So are you saying if somebody tries to sell when the interest rates, current market rates are higher than the rate on their mortgage and HOA fees are high or whatever, they're probably gonna be prevented from selling, or they're gonna take a loss?
They can sell, but they
They'll take a
will
loss.
take a loss.
Yeah.
And there's nothing we can do about that? We can't change the agreement to,
So
you know.
Again, but
we can, right? So I mean, you know, one thing which we haven't talked about, we haven't thought too much about is, and this is just an off the cuff. Yeah, crazy idea, right? Elsewhere in the town, we've got, these in lieu fees. Right? I mean, you know, we could, you know, allow somebody in that kind of situation to pay an in lieu fee to take the unit out of the program. If they demonstrate hardship, pay an in lieu fee that goes into the affordable housing trust that we have.
or we could choose, and I don't know how it would work, but I think of the term safe harbor, some sort of language that would, given the unique circumstances of the world, in any event, no one would lose money. I'm not sure how that would be legal. That's
Yeah.
essentially putting our thumb on the scale.
One of the things that some of the people that have come to us on this say is that but for these rules and these limitations on price, they feel they would be able to sell their house on today's market for a price that would let them pay off their mortgage. That it's really this limitation that is so you know, today's market would, you know, is adequate to make up for the price.
They'd be selling to someone who's,
You'd have to find a buyer.
well, right, and they'd have to sell to a buyer who can afford the price.
Right,
Which is not an affordable buyer.
right.
And we've had this conversation, we had this conversation several years ago where we said, like. All you've done is shrink your potential market. There's a buyer for everybody, for everything, somewhere.
Yeah.
You just have to find them.
Yeah.
And that's the hard work, and we're in an environment now, we simply say, I'm gonna sell my house, you've got 17 people making you offers. That hasn't been always that way.
No, that's right.
And so I heard you say, like, that's how people develop wealth, and well. In my mind, homeownership wealth happens over 20 or 30 years.
Right.
Not 1 year of owning a
Right.
condo.
Right.
Right, so their expectations need to be levelized a bit. This environment that we're in is so like, everyone's making money, I gotta make money, if I sell, I need to make money, and there's no risk.
It's always first.
I'm too much of a realist for
Yeah.
this. It's as you just said before, like, there's risk, they're adults, they made a decision. Everyone, like, you buy a house now, and suddenly your job changes and you get moved to California and you have to sell it, you take a
Yeah.
loss. My neighbor did it.
Yeah,
Nobody bailed him out.
right.
Yeah, he did that because he wanted to do This is different, this is they can't. They're being restricted, that was a decision he made, there's other restrictions in these affordable
No, but
housing.
it's the market that
Yeah.
drove him to have, and the market,
job,
the
yeah.
change in
Yeah.
interest.
So he
rate.
chose to get a new job.
Right.
He did the math and said, it's worth it for me to take this job elsewhere and take. the
Well,
loss
and
of
we're
this
muddying
benefit.
it
But,
a little.
well, yeah.
We're muddying it a
yeah,
little bit. The
yeah,
change,
but-
the market has
Yeah.
changed, interest rates went up, HOA fees go up, taxes go up. And so there's all these variables that move, and
Yeah.
we can't write an ordinance or a policy that predicts all of that.
The other piece of it is,
But
it
there's
is
always-
interesting that some people made a windfall, and should there be a limit
I
on
say
windfall?
windfall, but.
You know what I'm
they made
saying,
some-
but I'm saying,
Yeah.
should there be a limit on how much you can take away, because you have been underwritten for X amount of dollars or whatever, I don't know,
It's a subsidy,
right?
Did they take advantage of?
well, Make the Housing Authority has a program like that, but that actually recaptures. you know, so
Yeah,
you can
right.
Share the upside.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it, but we didn't have it in place. I mean, I just remember when Yarmouth had their affordable housing program, they had these silent second mortgages on houses. And back when I first got into the market, cause I'm a realtor myself, people may not know that. And back when I got in the market 22 years ago, things started, that was right before the crash, so all, it was like another hot market back then. And there were all these people they were selling their houses in these so-called affordable housing, but they were able to pay off these second mortgages, so those went away. So they went out of the affordable housing inventory. Yarmouth lost all of their affordable housing inventory.
Well, that's the other part of it, you don't wanna do that. you know?
I know, so I don't know what
That's
the
a
answer is.
That's
I
how
don't
Habitat
know. It's like-
doesn't concern themselves beyond the first round.
Yeah,
I do understand what you're saying though, too. It can't be like every 2 years where someone's just gonna make a ton of money or break even, whatever. It may be 5 years that you need to stay in that house.
Yeah, minimum.
The Springton's underwater 40 in 10 years, maybe ahead 200,000.
so you could have a minimum required ownership period, potentially, I don't know.
That's hard. Well,
I know,
like-
exactly.
like
Well,
it's gone.
And
People die.
Maine has first time home buyer
Must stay
program.
alive.
You sell it in the first 5 years.
Oh, I did mine when I did Main Street.
It can't be the first community that faces this.
7 years. Or I had
You
to
know?
pay back what I was subsidized,
There's not many in Maine that have a program like this.
Is that right?
18%
Not that I'm aware.
mortgages, baby.
We did it on the east end of Portland, out of the school condo.
I got a nice bite out of it.
We ran into the
That's a
same.
headache, right?
Eric, I feel like
ran
you
into the
warned us
same
about this
issue.
3 years ago.
What's your-
Nothing, the market is the market. If you can
Yeah.
find a buyer who qualifies at a price that you're willing to sell it for, how about it?
Yeah,
And if you can,
And if you can't, you can't.
Musical chairs.
oh, it's crazy, it's so crazy.
Right.
Anytime I have buyers who can't get into anything, unless they drive all the way out to East Gish somewhere, right, Michaela?
No, it's gonna be incredibly hard for you to manage too. Like, you're trying to
Well, I
Stay within the guidelines.
You feel
of
bad.
Affordable housing, and
Yeah.
some of these are going
You
way
have
up.
hearing all the particular details of people's life circumstance. And so, yeah, it does get hard. And it just strikes me, interest rate is the culprit here. And
Right,
in spite of the higher interest rate environment we've been in for a while, housing prices continue to soar because people are just,
lack of inventory,
but they're also paying probably over market what they should, and because they've got the cash, they're coming from a different
oh, you think?
environment. But those factors don't come into play in this kind of equation, right?
Yeah.
No.
It's the great equalizer.
And interestingly, this program is meant, when we talk about housing affordability, it's the affordability of the payment. Right, it's not, it's,
Right,
it's a monthly payment that we
Right.
really focus on.
well, that's what buyers,
so-
I mean, one thing buyers care
So
about.
that-
And the all-in housing.
Is that what they want?
Well, I mean, you can't, like I said, you can't. I remember having this conversation, if I quit my job and had no income, but had $1 million in savings and was willing to pay this person $350,000 for their condo,
Right,
I think I qualify. and I pay cash, so I.
Well, I was gonna say your cash buyer,
Would be impactful to me.
What are those
So
out there?
we sort of took the risk that if that's the way it could potentially work. Does it feel right? No, but can you safeguard against everything?
Yeah.
No, I don't,
Yeah.
we just do the best we can. It's hard.
And then when I sell it, it may be in a bad market. I may not get 350 for it, and I walk away with 320 or 300, who knows, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think back to the day when everything was underwater, 2008, 2007, in that market.
But the real.
All the short
reality is,
sales.
Modern history, real estate's one of your safest investments, right?
Over
Oh,
the long
absolutely.
term.
Long term,
Yeah.
yeah.
Long term.
Well, it's been at least 720 days.
Historically, in the long term, yes.
Yeah.
No.
Hundreds of days.
Well, this has been enlightening. I didn't realize how heartless you all are. No,
Yeah, we're just.
I get it.
we're awful.
Typical affordable housing developer.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you guys make all the money. and,
Barry took away all our goodwill with this policy talk.
Yeah.
I said no a lot, Tom.
That's one, you can't expect anything different from the CPA here.
Yeah.
That's how I think.
The young woman, a homeowner who've been chatting with, I think is interested in coming to a future meeting, so don't be surprised. I think it's
Yeah.
important for you to, hear directly from someone and what their circumstances are. And to her credit, she clearly understands, she knows what she was getting into, she's very articulate, and quite persuasive. I would say.
And they can't rent it either.
They cannot.
Oh, yeah,
That's
yeah.
another thing we could talk about. I mean,
Yeah.
currently that's restricted in the agreement. but-
Yeah, it's not fully clear that that's the case. There may be some opportunities for, kind of special exemptions about that.
See, that seems like an interesting option.
Yeah,
Right,
because
and
now.
Except the
and
rents
she's
are high
looking-
now too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, they're
She's
more.
looking to go to someplace else
Yeah.
because she has an option of moving in with someone else, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
You'd have
If
to
you
have
allow the
restrictions
rental,
on
then
rent.
you're not
Yeah.
taking, she's still making money.
Well,
on
would
it.
the rental be limited to a qualified
Mhm.
buyer or what?
Yep.
Well, yeah,
At least
that
that would be
would be my
covering mortgage expense.
Yeah.
and-
Yeah.
And then you're not losing money, and then 5 years later, you can sell it for $50,000.
Are you willing to kick that idea around a bit more?
Yeah,
I
Hmm.
think it makes sense.
To do so, I think we would have to modify the agreement, but
well,
as Brian says, there's only 7 total, and I suspect
Well, I
we'd be interested in putting something in place that would be to their benefit.
Yeah. Halloween's
we can
coming up,
modify-
we knocking on doors.
Halloween.
We can modify the agreement going forward.
But we don't have any new houses in this program.
Will there be?
That's a case by
Yeah.
case.
Potentially.
Yeah, I mean,
With the down.
10% of the downs being.
Yeah, I mean, they're meeting the majority, they're way ahead of 10%, and they're doing it
The
through
rentals.
the rentals.
Yeah,
And quite honestly, I don't do a very good job as a town manager. I certainly don't do a very good job as a housing authority manager. We just don't have the administrative infrastructure to deal with this. So the thought of having dozens of these,
yeah, well, you need a housing authority.
Right.
You
I
need
think
to
looking
set
at the
up a
rental
housing
option does make sense. Because
is
it
anyone
helps
willing
out
to
Higher on
look at that
South
agreement and
Mhm.
suggest,
Back with South Laurel.
is anyone willing to look at the agreement and suggest, ways to fold in or add in, a rental option?
I would defer to the people that do this on a daily basis.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm leaving anyway, I'm a short timer. So.
Yeah, I heard about that.
We're still resident of Scarborough.
Well, that's true.
I see no takers. All
There
right,
you
go
go.
on, crack it.
I mean, I'll look at it, but I'm starting from way back. I mean, you guys
Great.
both were here
Fresh
with
eyes.
this thing.
Yeah.
Fresh eyes.
Great.
Thank you.
First eyes would be good.
Thank you for your service.
Don't go
Thank you for your service.
Give it to the retired.
Perfect.
There you go. You got
Don't
plenty of
make
time
eye
to review.
contact.
Bill, I'll send you the agreement.
That's not meant the question, I'll ask it.
Exactly.
Bill, I'll send you the agreement, all right?
Thank you.
In fact, I'll circulate it to everyone, just so.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had a question, when I saw Brian's email, I said, wait a minute, I need some.
Slow it down.
Yeah.
Well, at least you didn't come to a meeting and get appointed, so.
Yeah, right.
Maybe I did.
Great, Tom, time for public comments?
I see no one.
Well, they won't.
Here.
All right,
No one online.
all right, we haven't
Bids are
attracted
not-
any public
bids
to
are
our
not
meeting tonight.
lower.
Somebody like to take the last item? Jean Marie, would you like to
What?
move to adjourn?
I'm not a voting member, so I can't.
All right, thank you very much. We are
Yeah,
adjourned.
the seconds.
Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Did anyone, sorry, I was
Yeah,
late,
darn.
did you all approve the minutes from June?
Jeez.
I don't think they.
No.
We did, but just say we did.
So we have.
I'll call this meeting back to order again. Somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes from June?
So move.
Second.
Great, all in favor? All right. It was a close meeting.